Enthusiasm with multi-tonal voice.
Yes.
Yes. Yes.
But it was when like 8 Mile came out, and
He could do that.
he had his own little notepad where he was gonna like write his own raps down. He was obviously gonna become a rap sensation, and they were on a school like a football tour trip somewhere.
Yeah.
And the bigger boys stole his book, and it said like Greg's rhymes on the front. I think with a Z.
This is your brother?
Yeah.
So Greg was a lyrical beatmaster.
And they opened his book, and it just said the only rhymes in it, if you can call it that, were I'm rapping, I'm tapping, and there's no time for napping.
Oh. Well, I think that's introduced it quite lovely.
Yeah. Going back to the earlier point.
Tom, thanks for joining, man.
Tom
No problem.
Coles.
Thanks for having me.
It's been awesome. If you'd like to introduce yourself, what do you do?
Oh,
Who you are?
so I am Tom Coles, one of Kirk's earliest friends, I suppose. A comedy writer is by trade, I suppose. Who says by trade? Does anyone say by trade
I
anymore?
feel like a standard.
Is that a thing?
Yeah.
By trade?
You do a comedy.
I do a comedy. I do a funny occasionally.
Yeah.
Have a daft laugh and a muck about and that.
Why not?
Yeah, so that's me.
I like it.
Thanks.
Superb. Well, how did you first like? Because I remember you did a writing course, didn't you? What spurred it on?
I did.
Is it something you've always been into? Or was
Kind
it-
of, yeah. I mean, what spurred it on was a sort of temporary insanity, I think, because I'd always kind of been into comedy in the same way kind of most people are, I think. And then I got a job in insurance, which was kind of painfully dull. But so I was like, I want to do something else. And I was always like comedy. So I was like, why don't I just write a sitcom? That'll be fun. And rather than writing that in my spare time, whilst I had a well-paid job, I just quit. I quit a job.
Yeah.
I left a job, and that's not very clever. And then, but
Yeah.
I was writing with my brother Matt at the time, who was doing a PhD in like quantum physics or something. Is it something?
Yeah.
You know, something insane.
Quantum mechanics.
So I went up to live with him for a while. Actually, you had Matt on the podcast, didn't you?
Yeah.
Oh, is that your brother?
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
No way.
Yeah.
I'm sure I told you
Yeah.
I
that.
never. I was
No.
like, we had someone on.
Yeah. I'm sure
Yeah,
I said
one of the-
Matt's brother.
No way. No. I didn't.
Oh, okay.
Me,
fair
I'm just.
enough.
Phew.
Yeah, I might have said it to someone else.
Awesome.
I said it
That's
to
so,
you.
your brother's so clever.
Yeah, I know. He got sort of all the good genes, unfortunately. He's about a foot taller than me, and a full head of hair, which don't have anymore. So no, I went up to live with him at university. So he was doing a PhD in quantum physics. I was sleeping on his floor doing next to nothing. And then one day I bumped into a guy at a party who also was kind of into comedy, and a guy called Ed. And the next day we started writing the sitcom together. And so now I'm in a writing partnership with Ed and have been ever since. And we kind of wrote some stuff, applied for a comedy writing and producing course. And the sort of course leader on that is a guy called Bill Dare, who's he's a producer. He made like Spitting Image. I don't know if you heard of that back in the day.
Yeah, I've heard of it.
It's like a satirical kind of puppet show that was quite big, I think, in the 90s. And he does a show called Dead Ringers as well, which is an impression show. So he liked our stuff, and then we kind of got on there, and then from there you kind of just meet other producers. And so I've kind of been working on Radio 4 for ever since, to do some TV stuff and write for some stand-ups and bits and pieces.
Nice.
So,
That's badass.
So what was your original? So you wrote this.
yeah.
You wrote this piece.
Yeah.
What was it? What was it on?
So
Vaguely.
with the first sitcom we wrote.
Yeah.
So-
So it was the sitcom that he liked.
Well, yeah, so that's what we had to submit to get onto the course. And then once we were on the course, we were being
Right.
taught a variety of different sort of styles of comedy. So from gag writing, sketch writing, kind of topical comedy, satirical stuff. And it was our work on that course that he kind of liked. But we wrote a sitcom called The Artiste. I'm trying to remember it now. It
Is it
feels
something
like
you think you'd ever revisit?
No, it probably isn't. Because kind of looking back to it now, it kind of bears all the tropes of like a really new, green writer. And it's not horrendous and it's not terrible, but it's not something I particularly fancy doing again. It was just about a pretentious artist, a bit of like a kind of coming from an incredibly rich background, and just thought he could kind of work his way into this world of like modern art, very pretentious. So yeah, no, I don't think I'd ever revisit that now. Actually, funnily enough, I think one of the tropes of a new comedy writer
Sorry, I'm going to put this on the floor because we've.
Is it picking up?
No, we've got some coasters on order, but whenever
Right.
we do it on this table, we every time you put a glass down, it just goes clang right through the microphone.
Straight through the mic.
Yeah, sorry, I wasn't confiscating your tea.
Yeah.
It's right there whenever you need it.
That's enough.
That's still yours.
There was too long a pause between you picking it up and explaining.
I don't carry on his point, but this continue.
like a baby's feeder.
Yeah.
It's a bit like,
No, what-
you've had enough caffeine.
What's he doing my tea?
Yeah, so I think one of the kind of hallmarks of a new writer is that you think every idea and every joke you do is going to be the last one you do. If you think it's good, you're like, that's my like magnum opus, that's that thing. And you kind of realise the longer you do it, it's just new ideas come, better ideas come. There are like probably some small elements of that early script that maybe I'd look at again and think, oh, maybe that character's good, or that line, or that like that particular character trait I could use again. But yeah, I think sometimes your first stuff is best left to the bin of time.
Yeah.
Is there any like formula that you've recognised throughout writing, even from the beginning, that you're like, that works, I'm going to follow that?
Yeah, there are, and they really vary from different types of comedy. We do a lot of sketch writing, and sketch writing again can really vary depending on it being in front of a live audience or not in front of a live audience. Because not in front of a live audience, you can kind of be a bit more naturalistic, a bit slower paced in.
Sorry, just
I'll take that away.
Come on, guys.
You'd think I'd know where my mouth was by this
Yeah.
this age, but I just dribbled all down my front. Please excuse me.
Because I'm sure there's some particular cues that you
Yeah.
face, especially with doing like audience type sitcoms.
Yeah, yeah. So with the audience stuff, you need jokes really regularly, and also you need to keep a high pacing, like an energy in something. So kind of in sketch writing, in front of an audience, we find like having big, manic, lively characters are always a great kind of formula. In terms of like sitcom though, not necessarily. There's tropes and kind of formulas, maybe not formulas. There's kind of tropes and styles and characters that I like. I do like slightly downbeat characters in sitcom. I think, have you watched Fleabag? Have you been watching any
No.
of that recently?
No.
It's just incredible if you get a chance to watch it. So that's a frame of reference I can't use.
Yeah. Are you a fan of Ricky Gervais?
I have a complicated relationship, I think, with Ricky Gervais.
Yes. Have you watched his most recent
Afterlife?
Afterlife.
Yeah. You quite liked it, didn't you?
haven't seen it yet.
I binge watched it the other
Yeah.
weekend. I liked it a lot.
So firstly, I don't particularly like criticising other people's work because comedy is so painfully hard,
Yeah.
and everyone's trying their best all the time. So
Yeah.
it doesn't feel hugely helpful for me to be too critical of stuff. But I felt like a lot of the jokes I'd heard from his old podcasts. I don't know if
Yes.
you ever listened to those.
Yes, I remember like the
Extra film
newspaper when he makes the newspaper reference. and
Yes,
things.
yeah, and there's
But
like the breast milk thing. with
Yeah,
the-
there were all sorts of things from his life
and
he's
the,
drawn
and
on.
the first episode, I think he just, rather than doing jokes, he relied on just fat insults. He'd done like 6 on the bounce, and it got to the point of do something else. Don't just be doing insults because they're kind of one of the easiest things to write in.
Do you think that's the
comedy.
same with like swearing? Because I think it was like a whole Jerry Seinfeld thing during the 90s. It was like he was one of the only
Yeah.
comics that never swore,
Yeah,
and he like got obviously big from what he did.
yeah.
And then they thought like swearing was a cheap way to get a laugh.
But
It absolutely is a cheap way to get a laugh, but I'm not above it. I bloody love it. Swearing. I think it's
yeah.
I think it's great. And if you
No
can
worries.
do it well in sitcom, again, have you ever seen a program called The Thick of It? Like a
Man, I'm so like not well
Yeah,
versed in
yeah, I
TV.
know it's terrible.
Yeah. Well, there's a character in that, a guy called Malcolm Tucker, who just makes an art of swearing. If you ever get a chance to, so if swearing's done really well, but I think with Gervais, he was just kind of saying stuff like, you know, fat cunt, which is not
Yeah.
particularly creative or
Yeah.
inventive.
I thought it was quite funny when he grabbed his fat behind his neck. And
Right.
said,
see
was this
this.
how your mother used to carry you around as a child?
Yeah.
I quite like- But I picked that out because I thought it was a good example of what you were saying. He explored some sort of darker topics, and
Yeah.
it was like a long pause between the laughs,
Yeah.
which you couldn't do on stage, could
Yeah,
you?
absolutely, yeah.
But the fact there was more like darker emotional stuff, and then when you did laugh, it felt like more of a release.
Yeah.
Like you'd earned the laugh.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. Well, I agree. It's much more of a comedy drama, I think, than a sitcom, and,
Yes.
and certainly than his previous
What
stuff.
is the distinction? What makes a sitcom?
I think it depends if it's a one camera thing or if it's a multiple camera thing. For instance, sitcoms would have multiple cameras to capture. Like if it's in front of a live audience, you need to have each character covered. Whereas typically some comedy stuff will be single camera, which is quite common now, just for budgeting, I imagine.
Yeah.
Does sitcom mean live audience as well?
No. So a sitcom is literally composed of two parts, it being a situational comedy. So it's a set of characters that you keep returning to time and time again. So if you think of like Friends, or you think of like Seinfeld or Frasier or any of those kind of ones, it's the same characters that you keep returning to. And then you normally have characters who have a certain comedic flaw that will keep getting them into trouble over and over again, and they'll never learn from their mistakes. Whereas drama, you get like character arcs, so they learn from something, and by the end of it, normally in a film, they'll have kind of
They've
found
sort of
the
grown
answer.
as
Yeah, they've
characters.
grown as a character, exactly.
Yes.
So this was slightly different in that sense, wasn't it? Because by the end of it, he'd kind of accepted the death of his
he'd
wife
sort of
a bit,
grown
and
as a
he'd
character.
grown. So which would make me think that he probably won't do a second series, and that's why I think it's more of a comedy drama
Yes.
than it. So also sometimes with comedy drama, it can be a bit of an excuse to not have many jokes in it.
Yes.
Yeah.
I was just about to say, do you find as a comedy writer that there's some sort of limit with adding like political references in because they could be outdated, trying to make like a timeless show?
I'm sure it's a consideration. I think more often than not, that's a consideration of a producer or an exec. I think kind of as a writer, certainly when you're starting out writing a project, you want to just focus on how can I make this the funniest thing possible? But yeah, I mean, you don't get too many sitcoms that have like incredibly up-to-date political references in, because they take, if I write a script now and if a TV channel picks it up, it'll probably take 6, 7, 8, 9 months for them to read it, and then it's probably another year of them negotiating back and forward how it's going to work, what they're going to pay people, getting their cast together, filming a pilot, and then by the time that's shot and out, that's probably 4 years later. So
You got to feel. It takes some real long-term thinking, doesn't it?
yeah, it does.
Or is it something you've sort of got to chip away in the background while you're either doing other things?
Yeah, because no one pays you really to write spec scripts, to come up with stuff on your own. You have to kind of, and it takes such a long time to write the script. Probably takes Ed and I together, I think, to get a final finished draft that we're happy to send to people. Our last one took us about 6 months, I think. And that's not like 6 months continually, but you have to work that around your other paid work. So I suppose just as a freelance writer, but as anything involving freelance, you need to find a nice balance between stuff you're getting paid for and your own passion projects as well.
Yeah.
Which I'm sure you.
Do you have
guys
any
find
advice and workarounds? That's something I think most writers suffer with, procrastination issues, don't they?
Yeah.
Is it something you still battle with? Have you found workarounds, or can you enter flow state more easily with practice?
I don't think I've ever entered flow state. I love the idea of it.
I'm not sure I have.
Can you explain flow state?
It's when, or I don't know, in sport you might call it getting in the zone,
Just
where everything's just flowing,
cracking out.
I suppose the real definition is when you're completely focused on what you're doing. There's no past or future. You're completely in the present, lost in like total focus in what you're doing.
Yeah.
So it could be anything really.
I feel like I remember experiencing that with friends of mine at uni, and they'd have like dissertations, everything last minute, and they're taking those let's get those pills that bring you from the States.
Modafinil. Oh, no, Adderall.
Like Adderall, one of those kind of like
Yeah.
enhancing drugs. And I remember like I got a friend of mine that was on it and like, this is the shit, this is amazing. And then the next day they read it and they're like, what a load of shit all of this is. Because at the time you're thinking like, this is amazing. And then like, oh my God, what have I written?
Well, yeah, I don't think I've ever written a good first draft of anything as well. Everything comes out in the rewriting process. But, so your question was,
I think that's
procrastination.
Yes, procrastination, or because that's another thing whenever I've tried to write anything, it's that perfectionism of wanting it to be good first time round, and you just have to accept that it's going to be
And
shit.
that
first time
I think
round.
that is my trick of getting over procrastination is just going into it, going everything I write here is going to be shit, and not just a bit shit. Some of the jokes don't work, dog shit. Like this is
Right.
going to be poor.
Yes.
But once you've got a script or some jokes or something down, it's so much easier to tweak and twist and work out what's funny and what stuff's working.
Scaffold.
Yeah, it's absolutely. You're building the foundations. They're
Yeah.
they're hidden in there somewhere.
You can think of it like a painting, really, can't you? If you start with a canvas,
Yeah.
often you'll just have a base layer of one colour,
Yeah.
and then you'll do the outline, and then you'll just add layers, won't
Yeah.
you? And it's the same. It's that black shit.
Yeah.
Base paint is the first draft, isn't it?
I think what's quite interesting is like it's basically as a creative, how do you know when to stop, or like when to stop making those revisions?
It's a tough one. I think I have a huge advantage over a lot of writers who work on their own because I've got a writing partner. So in terms of knowing when to stop, the other person reads your stuff and they tell you when stuff's good. So you've got an immediate feedback there. So I think that helps. And beyond that, I think it's just a natural gut instinct. I think also, even when you send stuff off, I'm never entirely happy with every single element of it. I don't think you ever kind of can be.
No.
There's as a sort of game, comedy is something you can never win. There's no such thing as like the perfect joke or the perfect script or even something it's all subjective as well,
Yeah.
right? Something you might find funny, like we said with Afterlife.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people it's kind of really touched a kind of personal nerve with,
Yeah.
and other people kind of haven't quite haven't quite
ways,
taken to it so much. So I think it's just a gut instinct more than anything, and also showing other people.
How do you find like working with like such a like an interesting like what's happening now? As in
Yeah.
like there's a lot of things going on at the moment that people are more sensitive about.
Yeah.
So how do you kind of predict what could happen, what not, or like as Ricky Gervais does, it just doesn't give a shit and just get on with it. Do you find there's a certain element that you have to kind of protect?
Yeah. Again, it really depends what format you're writing for. So if I'm working for the BBC on something, then you kind of have to adhere to their taste guidelines. You can, or if you're working for Channel 4, they're slightly looser. It depends also what slot that program's you're aiming for. So we might be writing something that we think is going to be a big like primetime BBC One family sitcom. So you have that in mind. So it kind of, so I think it totally depends on the slot. If I'm just writing something for me, I think it just comes down to what I feel like I can defend morally, I think.
Yeah.
And I think sometimes I kind of differ with Ricky Gervais's one. I think that's it, he says stuff because he can rather than he should, is what I sometimes feel. I don't know if you agree or
I think so. I think he's kind of built up that persona of that personality of like this is what you get, accept it or not.
yeah.
But then, there are some things that are just seem a bit absurd that become widely accepted.
Yeah.
I think it takes someone like that to say them out loud.
Yeah,
There's like a sigh of relief, like, oh, thank God. Like, so like, we're all agreeing this is absurd, but somehow everyone's just keeping quiet about it because that's become the new norm.
Yeah. That's what I love about comedy, especially like uninterrupted, unmoderated comedy, like stand up or like podcasts. I listen to a lot of like comedic podcasts, and it's just like, just say whatever you want, and I love that.
Yeah, it's the last vestige of free speech, isn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I think, like I was talking about with the kind of what like format is it going to be? Is it going to be on a podcast or is it going to be stand up? And those two, I think specifically, as I'm sure you guys have found out, is just you can get up on stage or you can put out on your podcast anything you think is worthy of being out there, and I think that's very creatively freeing, and it's always good to have that outlet. But as a freelance writer, I'm constantly writing for different people. I'm writing gags for different comedians, so I'm constantly trying to adjust taste and tone to what I think either the performer who's saying our words is going to be comfortable with, or the channel who's putting it out.
Yeah.
So there's a huge amount of conversation going on at the moment in the comedy world about what should and shouldn't be allowed to be said, and it's a really complex argument that I sometimes feel like I'm best not to even consider wading into.
it's like remember that the whole Tom Segura thing, you know, when he in his stand up he had a whole bit about the fact that you can't say particular words.
Yeah.
And one of the examples was retarded. He's like, you can't say that word.
Yeah.
And because he said that in his special, they've banned all that word in every Netflix show.
Right.
And I've even witnessed shows that I've seen years ago, and they've gone back and bleeped the word.
Yeah.
Or muted it.
So I feel like,
No, like,
the
that's
problem is, yeah, it's really hard, isn't it? Because then it does get to a point when you go, yeah, that's too much.
Yeah.
But then if you do start editing people's speech, then someone's making that judgment,
Yeah.
and then people always have their own agendas, don't they?
Yeah.
I don't know, but once you start letting a bit of that go, it sort of, I feel like it opens up the doors for controlling people's speech in other ways.
Mm-hmm.
It could be a dangerous snowball
Yeah,
effect,
you can
couldn't
get-
it? I think it's something to be wary of.
Yeah.
But
You get comedy, like
yeah.
let's say you want to do a stand-up, they're saying, right, you can only do jokes about this and this. Like you actually can't even control your own set.
Yeah.
It could
So-
get to that point as
yeah.
an extreme.
Yeah, like a lot of countries, you get arrested for making a joke about the government.
Yeah.
Like that's like to the extreme level, isn't it? So I think it's like it's probably good to have those little battles on when it is still mild. Like otherwise, if you keep letting things go, then it's
Yeah,
could
before you know
escalate,
it.
couldn't it? But
I think stand-up's a great example of just a platform where you can get up and you can say whatever you like, and if an audience like it, they'll laugh, and if an audience don't, they won't. And there are really right-wing comics, and there are incredibly left-wing comics, and they all kind of find their own audience. It's different on a channel, and certainly on a publicly funded channel like the BBC as well. So I can totally understand well, for one, legally they have to be as balanced as they possibly can, and as fair to everyone as they possibly can.
of course.
But I do kind of agree. Too many rules do stifle creative thinking and comedy in general. So yeah, it's a proper minefield, and it feels like the discussion is happening now, and it will find its balance. Sometimes it goes slightly too far one way or the other, and it's always the two people from both sides of that spectrum that shout the loudest, and are the ones that end up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I'm kind of comfortable that it will just come back to a
Yeah.
I feel like
think so.
the
And
most-
going back to sort of, sorry to interrupt, podcast, like saying, yeah, stand-up's very important for that.
Yeah.
I feel like sort of podcasts are actually also a great medium for like long-form
yeah.
discussions about these topics. It's
Yeah.
so complex and requires sort of long, thoughtful discussion
Especially
about it.
with millennials, I think as well. I think that's kind of podcasts has become one of the biggest outlets of free speech
Yeah.
and say what you wish.
It's the sort of antidote to Twitter, really, isn't it? Which you get. I mean, I don't even know how many characters now. It's like 200
Yeah,
something, isn't
I've never got into Twitter.
No, I thought like one social media platform is kind of enough.
Yeah.
How many times do I need to say something?
I have a love-hate relationship with Twitter, because if you're just writing gags, they always say brevity is levity. So the shorter a joke is, normally the kind of funnier it is.
Less fat.
There's less fat, exactly, yeah, and you can trim stuff down to and it becomes like a word puzzle where you just take out all the totally unnecessary words and you make sure the funny bit's right at the end of the sentence. And Twitter's a great like platform for just tweeting these like word for word perfect jokes. But if you're talking about political discussion, there's no room for nuance.
Yeah.
So, and more now, politics and comedy are kind of, weaving themselves into each other.
Yeah,
And
I kind of don't like that. Like as soon as I watch like a good stand-up, like 40 minutes in, I'm like, man, this is amazing. It starts talking political. I'm like, you totally lost me.
Right?
I'm like, I just want to like. I find comedy as like a window out of that. It's like to get out of that world.
Yeah.
Like every day you're getting bombarded with this about the UK government or American government.
Yeah.
It's like I just want to like laugh.
It's
I just
an
want to see
escapism.
something and
But
laugh.
don't you think like the best comedy though it's like social commentary of like it's making things that people are sort of scared to talk about or are normally sort of taboo, and you craft a joke where you can you can
Yeah.
tiptoe over the tripwires
totally.
and everyone laughs and it's like
Yeah.
because you've laughed, you've sort of
Yeah.
moved past it a little bit. I
I
think
appreciate good jokes, like clever jokes that people have actually like really cultivated.
Yes.
When you hear a joke that's like a political joke that's just a cheap, like this guy is this, and it's like,
Yeah, or
like,
just
that's
like
cheap.
Donald
that's like
Trump's wig
going-
shit.
Yeah, like going
Yeah.
back to like if you swear that's a cheap laugh. It's like saying like a really obviously daft statement about someone like politically. I'm like, oh, you ready?
But I think that hits the nail on the head, because good comedy is comedy that makes you laugh, and so you can, and I think that's the key element. Is it funny or not? So you can listen to whoever, like Frankie Boyle, who says the darkest stuff,
Yeah. So,
and me, who has kind of like pretty left wing. I'll let that slide. I'll let my moral slide because the joke's so good and because it's so hilarious.
the delivery.
Yes.
So, and I think probably, I imagine the same for you. Don't let me put words in your mouth, but you might prefer stuff that isn't political. But if you hear a joke that's fucking nails something,
Yeah.
you're like, well,
That's the thing. If it's clever,
Yeah.
if it's like clever, regardless if it goes against my ethics or whatever, I think if it's cleverly produced,
yeah.
I'm like, that's good. You really worked on that.
That's just it, isn't it? Is it good or not? It's kind of all it boils
Yeah.
down to half the time.
But then also, you shouldn't. Yeah. But you don't want to like hang someone out to dry if they attempted something and it wasn't funny.
Yeah.
You're like, ooh,
Yeah, but
like,
it's special.
I'm offended now because it wasn't
because
funny.
the joke's bad.
Yeah, and it's like, well, it's a bad joke. It doesn't necessarily make them a bad.
Yeah, but
person,
surely like
does
a
it?
stand-up is when that's your show. That's like
Yeah.
when people
Yeah.
like like Dave Chappelle said he'll do like 50 shows before he'll put his special together.
Yeah.
So it's like people will do these, see what works, what doesn't work. Obviously, those jokes that might not be good
Yeah.
work in some places.
But I think as a stand-up, you're telling your audience something about yourself. You're putting forward a persona. And if you tell a joke that is sort of accidentally wrong and makes them think that you're meaner than you are, that you're less kind or whatever, too left-wing, too right-wing, something that kind of rubs them up the wrong way, you can just totally lose your audience just immediately. And it's a tough one, and that's why comedians do so many like work in progress shows,
Yeah.
and they try and hone stuff and they talk amongst themselves.
I would like to watch those because you only ever watch the finished sort of crafted ones,
Like a live
But-
show.
But obviously they have to go to small shows with an audience and sort of try things they've thought of. Go, oh, that didn't work.
Yeah.
I want to watch how the best people fail
Fail.
gracefully. Because that must be because
Yeah,
like
half the time
most
they
of
don't
them
fail gracefully. They just fail.
They just fail. But then there's people watching. How do they? I want to know how they deal with that and keep moving forward. Like, do they have like a formula of being like, oh, that one didn't work, and like bring the audience on
I
board?
think that's what it is. I think because I've seen like a few very early 90s stand-up like shows on like Def Jam or something, and maybe they've fuffed a joke up, and like it's all about like interacting with the audience to diffuse whatever the situation is
Yeah.
by a comedy kind of riff.
Point out the elephant in the room.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'd assume so.
Like
But it'd
Patrice
be
O'Neill
interesting
has a
to-
really good like if you watch his like uncut stand up, there's bits where he talks some dark shit, and like there's this audience that hate that, and he just jokes with it, and you can hear it. It's all part of the whole show.
I'd like to watch that. The good comedies flopping with early material and how they get over
It's
it.
quite a deflating thing to watch a comedian you love fail, and not. I don't think saying something that portrays them in a slightly bad light. Just telling a bad joke, telling something that
Yeah.
feels intrinsically unfunny.
Yes.
It really. It just feels like a very deflating thing.
I'd assume it's
I
something
wouldn't
you'd
recommend
watched.
it. It's like seeing someone do a bad magic trick.
Mm.
You will immediately remember that person as a bad magician.
You know
like
what?
it takes something away. Yeah. In fact, I saw a work in progress with Ricky Gervais.
Yeah.
And he had in fact, Brian Gittings, who is in Afterlife, you know, the kind of weird guy who does the puppet show.
Yes.
He was the like support act, and he
Yes.
was incredible. And he clearly had crafted a show or like a 15-minute set that was at the end of its like rewriting process.
Yes.
was
it was
close
in
to
the
being
third trimester.
Yeah, it was in its third trimester exactly. And Gervais was right at the start of his,
Mm-hmm.
and so then you start questioning: is this person actually good? Is there there anything like, are any comedians just good comedians, or is it just hard work and rewriting and going through, going over jokes over and over
Yeah.
again until they're right?
So I guess that is a different thing, crafting a joke. Because I mean, there must be comedians that aren't that funny on a day-to-day basis, but they craft good
Yeah.
jokes
Yeah.
Yeah.
to say on stage. Or,
You know what? I've seen a lot of female comics that are like that. Like you see them like every day, and I can tell like they're like the shy person that
Yeah.
like just tries not to get in the way. But as soon as they're on stage, I'm like, that's
to
hilarious.
life.
And there's so many female comics. I'm like, that's brilliant.
Well, funnily enough, I find writers to be something a bit like that. Is because we spend all day like kind of like bookworms with just hidden jokes, kind of tweaking words, shifting things about. In private, no one wants to talk about comedy anymore. No one wants to spend that effort trying to be funny. People want to talk about who's tiling your kitchen.
Yes.
What you're like.
That's something I've noticed. Chefs often have really bad diets.
Yeah.
Because they're cooking all day,
Yeah.
and they'll see them ordering like a doner kebab from the. Because they're like, I don't want to cook anything else.
Yeah, they want speed and
Yeah,
convenience.
yeah.
Do you cook at home? That's the thing. Like if you're like you work at a very busy restaurant or something, do you want to spend that time like cooking a big meal at home, or you're like, I just want to make an omelette and then go home?
I know.
Like do my thing.
Yeah, I've not lived with a chef.
No.
But I haven't asked.
Another thing that I thought was quite interesting, and it was like two quite interesting examples, because I went to a friend of mine used to get like like tickets to go see live shows.
Yeah.
And one day we went to see QI, and that was really fun, and it was amazing because the whole thing just worked beautifully. Like everyone worked together, and even like when the cameras weren't rolling, the riff was just perfect. It was fun.
The panelists go and do a bit of audience work.
It's amazing, and then that made me love it more, because I'm like, these guys are true artists, like in whatever sense that is. But then the next day we went to see like Lee Nelson's Well Good Show,
Right.
and that was like every 2 minutes was like, cut, gotta redo things, and I was like, man, this show's like only supposed to be 25 minutes or whatever, 22 minutes. And then we were there for hours because it kept making mistakes. And I was like, I never even watched the show before in my life. So like seeing that performance, I was like, yikes, this is really someone that's not well on.
Well, the first time I went to see Have I Got News For You, I was, again, it's that whole thing about being deflated. We got there and so they'll do like the picture round at the start. So they'll have a vaguely funny photo come up, and they'll be asked to do like what seems like quick riffs of like titling this picture. There'll be like a satirical like twist on it, and when you watch the finished show, they just go, someone says something, Paul Merton says this, Ian Hislop says that,
Yes.
the two panelists say something else, you move on to the next bit. In real life, they sit there in silence for like 30, 40 seconds.
I wonder.
And then they go, like, basically, what about this?
Well,
And the
just
audience
thinking-
go, the audience go, ha, 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 like, kind of struggling a laugh.
Yeah.
They crank that up in the edit.
Yeah. Because I always watch them. Look, see Paul Merton.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I always think he's so quick. Is he actually that quick? And I'm always thinking, has he just thought of that on the fly, or is it? Have they done a rehearsal and he's like repeating it, or it's written? Or
His background's in improv, so I imagine he's very quick and he kind of great at reacting to stuff. And I've been to Have I Got News For You shows since, and I know people who have and have just said it works like that show you were just talking about. It runs like a well-oiled machine, but sometimes it just doesn't. Sometimes all the work is in the edit.
yeah.
I guess that's a saving grace, really, because if you're a panelist, and let's say it's your first time, and you're quite intimidated by quite a well experienced show,
Yeah.
you might think like, oh, what if I mess up or everything. So I guess like if you got a producer saying to you, hey, look, don't worry about it. If there's something you got to think about, we can work on that.
Yeah, we can cut it.
So I
I
guess
guess
that-
it's almost a little bit like people feeling insecure looking at Instagram models, and then you realise they've all been photoshopped and airbrushed, and it's like you're like, oh, okay, makes you
That
feel
is
a bit
not
better. Yeah, no, it's not.
No one's that unnaturally
Yeah.
funny. And when you watch a stand-up show, you're seeing someone who's done 50 versions of that show, and then they've done probably 20 work in progresses, and they've also had experience of 20 years stand-up. So, and then they're learning it word for word and making it seem like it's really natural and off the cuff. You're not just... But the good comedians make it feel like it's just a natural pub chat. It's just you're sitting in front of them and they're telling a few funny stories and anecdotes.
It's funny about comedy as well, isn't it? You almost feel, you like buying into that illusion that it's almost it's like the first time they've said all this stuff, and it's like having a chat. But then like you'll see them on a different stage doing the same jokes, same
bits.
routine. You feel a little bit sort of cheated, don't you?
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
I don't know
that
why. It's like you wouldn't like if you listen to the same song again. You're like, oh, it's the
I was
same
about to
song. I'm
say,
enjoying that.
like,
but there's something about comedy. We all buy into this weird illusion that it's the first time they've said it, even though we obviously know it's crafted.
I was thinking about that the other day, and I was like, you can hear the same album every day or whatever. Like, you hear the same album, you're like, this is an amazing song. You go to see your artist live, and you're like, play that song because it's the song I love.
Yeah.
If you go to a comedy show and it's like, oh, I've heard that song, I've heard that.
Yeah, but
joke
I
already.
mean, I can re-watch like a comedy special on Netflix quite a few times, But if I rewatch the same show on a different stage, in like a different location, I would feel a bit like, oh, I don't know, you feel almost a little bit cheated, like
right,
slightly different audience, different reactions.
We all buy into this illusion that it's someone up there who's hilarious and they're telling you the funniest stories of their life, kind of off the cuff.
Yeah.
It's like a one-time thing.
It just isn't that. It's like seeing the workings of like seeing behind the curtain. It's seeing a magician show you how to do his tricks if you go to these shows. So I'd never recommend it. If you're just a casual comedy fan, I wouldn't do it.
So they normally do this at small comedy clubs where they work out hash out their
they try and do it
stuff
with 30 people there.
They won't do it in front of
I
guess
big
it's often the people that go to those are like comedy fans or sort of other comedy writers, and so everyone's sort of in on what's the process of what's going on a little bit.
And they'll say up front it's a work in progress, and it says it on the tickets it's a work in progress. So you kind of go there with slightly diminished expectations.
Yeah,
so
that's fair.
I think that's interesting. I think also, and correct me if I'm wrong because I don't know too much, but I'd imagine that a lot of the comics would unannounce that they're going to be performing, because if you've got a show and everyone's your fan, then everyone's going to love what you do. Whereas if you've got a show where most people don't even know who you are, and you can really gauge what works and what doesn't. So I'd imagine they would like just jump on stage and be like, hey, what's up?
I think so as well. And if you're a big name, so if you're a Ricky Gervais or whoever, you don't need to like worry too much about selling tickets. You'll go to like the Soho Theatre and just say, right, I want to do a quick run through on Friday night, and then the minute your name's out there, like a bit on Twitter or just word of
Michael
mouth,
McIntyre.
it's sold, done.
Imagine.
Yeah, those tickets are gone. So you don't need to kind of worry too much about kind of selling those.
Do you think, this is quite an odd one, but do you think that we're losing like family friendly comedy, like Lee Evans and like Michael McIntyre? It's now quite like everything's quite up paced.
Do I think we're losing it? I think it can feel like that, but I think also, I imagine we don't watch a huge amount of family-friendly comedy. Like, we're not normally in on a Saturday night watching Ant and Dec's Saturday Night Takeaway. But I think there are some really good ones. You know, Michael McIntyre is an incredible example of that, and he puts out so much content. When he's doing that comedy roadshow, he's almost doing like a new set every single night. I mean, some of it's like repurposed old material, but. So I think there kind of are those comedians around. I guess just for younger people like us, we don't seek it out, and with the rise of Netflix and stuff where you can just like catch up stuff, you can just pick and choose what you want to watch. We don't like sit in front of the TV anymore on a Saturday night, and whatever's on is on.
Yeah.
So
I was going to ask, how do you manage your writing partnership? Do you have a piece each that you're writing, and then you'll send it to each other for reads and updates, or are you both writing the same pieces, or does it vary?
So we're trialing a new system at the moment. I'll come back to you on how it's working, but we used to sit down when we were writing. Let's just take one example. So if we're just writing our own sitcom, we used to sit in a room together and write it, and it's a really slow kind of process because you need to both be there at the time. So then we kind of moved to, sometimes it'd be together, sometimes it'd be over Skype. That would be a really slow process, wouldn't it?
just strangers chiming in. Oh, fuck off.
Over Skype. But now we're getting more, I think maybe the more comfortable we've become in our own abilities. We're writing two separate projects, and once we've done a first draft, we switch them over. We do notes on each other's stuff. Sometimes the other person will do the second draft of your thing, and then you'll switch it back again. So yeah, it's a tough one, and I don't think any two writing partnerships do it in exactly the same way. But yeah, I feel slightly more comfortable now just writing stuff on my own. I think from the start of our careers, it was a crutch having someone else there. Because if you say something or write something down, if it's funny, that person will laugh, and then that can go in a script.
Do you find it helps that accountability helps get words on paper? Like you go, and they're expecting me to get that first draft to them.
Right.
Tomorrow, I better finish the amount of words they said. Otherwise, you might go, I'll just go and watch the telly. I'll do it tomorrow.
Yeah, it's so easy to do. I think with being freelance as well, that at the start, I was doing that all the time. I was just, it's so easy to just watch Netflix or go out for lunch with a friend or do something that's not writing. It gets really boring after a while. having a huge amount of free time actually isn't that freeing. So I don't struggle too much with like the whole procrastination thing anymore. But yeah, definitely setting a form of deadline. We'll just say, all right, we've got a week to get 20 pages done of our own sitcoms. Let's come back to each other on Friday.
Yeah.
Is a good incentive.
Was there any issues at the beginning with constructive feedback? Like, did you say like, "Oh, Tom, sorry, mate, that's a load of shit"? And you're like, "Oh, but, you know."
No, I love that bit.
Yeah, yeah, I
to
really
have to
like
argue
that.
your corner sometimes, or
Yeah, well, yes, yeah. It's a really tough thing to be told something's not funny. Like, can you imagine telling a joke or trying to be funny in the pub and someone just going, "Sorry, that wasn't very good." It cuts you really deep. So you have to tread on eggshells a bit, and you have to be a bit constructive. But whereas Ed and I were where we were colleagues first before we were friends, we kind of talked to each other with the natural respect of someone who wasn't your best friend, right? So we kind of just developed this process of letting someone down gently or giving kind of constructive feedback as you would to a total stranger. I think if you start writing with a mate or family member, you just be, "That's shit, that's rubbish."
Yeah.
Like you can be too harsh.
What advice would you give to someone that's quite interested in comedy but not really sure whatever gateway to get in, or if that's something that they can really pursue?
It's there aren't many like open door shows where you can just apply it. All the producers are really difficult to get hold of. Even we find it now really difficult to break into TV. I would say radio is a good way to work your way in. They're slightly more open to newer writers, and there is one show that we actually script editors on, but it's called Newsjack, and it's an open submission show, so anyone can submit stuff to it. It's a sketch based audience show, and you can send in your material, and if they think it's good, they get like 500 600 sketches per week, and we have to kind of filter those down and turn it into a show that's actually able to go out on air. But if you start getting stuff on that and some credits, then you meet new producers who move on to different places. So I would say Newsjack is one if you genuinely want to get into comedy writing. If that's not your if you're not just interested in comedy writing, stand-up's a great way. You just meet people in comedy as well, even if you don't want to pursue it. Actually going out there and doing stand-up's a great way. Or being funny on Twitter seems to work as well. If you can just be funny over and over again, like that seems to get people's attention. Or just writing sitcoms and sending them to producers. There's every single writer I've met has had a different way in, and there's no like apprenticeship. It's not like when you go and work in a bank or whatever, and if you do a year somewhere and you're good, someone will promote you to the next level, and a couple of years then you can get promoted up to something else. It's just a matter of being in the right place at the right time, socializing with the right people, being funny consistently, and just looking for opportunities. There are BBC hold a thing annually called the Writers' Room, where you can submit a sitcom script, and again I think they get like 2,000-3,000 scripts to that.
Do you think
it's difficult to stand out? But
do you think YouTube is a really good investment for someone that's
yeah that's probably one I should have mentioned, to be honest. It's not something I've been active in at all. It feels really alien to me, because to do good comedy, it feels like you need reasonably high production values. You need an audience to have confidence in you, and if the camera work looks shit and the sound is crap and you can't quite hear what someone's saying, people can really lose faith in you really quickly. So you would need a fair amount of startup money, even if it's just some good kind of clip on mics and a decent camera and some good editing skills. But it's definitely a way in. It's definitely a way to get noticed. Did you ever watch a sitcom called People Just Do Nothing?
Yeah.
Seen that? The garage guys.
Yeah.
they were found on YouTube. They
Really?
were, yeah. They just did
didn't
a
know
couple.
that.
I think it was Grinder and the other guy Beats.
Stevie.
Oh, and Steve's, yeah. And the three of them just did some straight to camera like stuff with their characters, and I think they just got
That's
they got
amazing.
picked
So
up.
the first piece of writing that was used professionally, you got paid for.
Yeah.
How did you just send that into the BBC cold? Was it
No.
someone you knew and gave it to, or
So the first thing we got paid for professionally was on a show called Dead Ringers, which is an impressions sketch show. So I don't know if you've heard of any of these people like John Coleshaw or Jan Ravens. They've kind of they had their own TV shows in the 90s. In fact, Dead Ringers was on TV in the 90s, and it's they do normally 2 series a year. Just to give you a kind of little bit of background of what it is, and it's like super topical. It gets kind of written a couple of days before, and then it gets aired the kind of next day. So it's heavily political, and it's all impression based. And the course leader on the course I was telling you about, he is the producer of Dead Ringers. So yeah, I think we were just like, let's just try and send him some sketches, right? Like he's here and we see him every week. So we said, would you be open to reading some stuff? And he was like, yeah, like I've kind of got all my writers, but if it's good, I'll have a look at it. And we just sent him some silly kind of little, really short sketches. We thought that's our best way on. If it's going to be, it's not going to kill a show if it's terrible, like a producer will go, oh, I can trial something that's 30 seconds in front of an audience. If they don't like it, we'll do some stuff from our heavy hitter writers that know how to work a crowd. So yeah, we just got some stuff on. It kind of snowballed from there. And sorry, what was the exact question? What was the first bit?
Yes, I think you
yeah,
answered
right. That was it.
Yeah.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. What was your routine? And what format was it?
So it was that, and then from then on, we started getting invited to writers' meetings, and in those meetings, that you get told what topics they want to cover that week, which then gives you an advantage over anyone else who's just sending stuff in kind of cold. But yeah, it's a pretty exhilarating experience for the first time, sitting in an audience of like 500 people, 400 people, hearing some professional performers up in front of them deliver your jokes and get. In fact, the first thing we ever wrote just got like an insanely good response straight off the bat. I mean, we've died since. Like, I'm not. This isn't a humble brag. But it's an exhilarating experience, and from that first moment of getting a laugh from that many people, I'm like, oh, thank God, I found something. I found like a thing.
I'm hooked now.
Yeah, I'm hooked. It's a drug. It's immediately a drug. You come out of those shows, and when they're good, the writers and the performers are like they've just done like 2 massive lines of coke. They can't stop talking. Everyone's like, their skin's tingling. It's absolutely a drug.
Hit.
Huge dopamine hit.
Wow. Do you feel underappreciated, like as like the kind of the guy behind the curtain, the one that made the joke? Like, do you find that?
Do I? I think I'm a writer because I don't want to be up on stage. So they're the ones taking the risk as well, right? The performers. So I know some writers do sometimes feel that way. Personally, not really. I think I'm much more cowardly than they are, so therefore don't deserve as much, don't deserve as much praise, because I'm writing stuff that if it goes badly, they're up there in front of 500 people and they've got to swallow that and they've got to kind of win the crowd back again.
Yes.
So they're, and good performers, they make a 6 out of 10 joke, an 8 out of 10 joke, and a bad performer will do exactly the opposite. So there's a huge amount riding on them. So no, not really. I don't
feel a little bit peeved where you're like, oh, that was a good joke, but you
Like,
didn't
just
you
shout
didn't
for
you
the-
didn't
that was my
perform it
joke.
well.
yeah, but you can also use that as a crutch, and we do it all the time. When your joke's
Yes.
bad, you're like, I actually think they didn't really deliver that. They didn't put the intonation on the right
Yeah.
word there, did they?
Yeah. Whereas if it was a 10, it still would have been an 8.
Yeah.
Yeah. So do you tend to have do you have like a feel for how to structure jokes and like why that was funny and tweak it, or do you often just use sort of intuition, like I find that funny, or how much analysis do you do of why something's funny?
So in fact, Ed and I, we teach comedy as well. Sometimes we teach kind of new comedy students sketch writing and gag writing, and there's definitely a formula to it. There's definitely it's kind of probably too complex to really go into now, but there's definitely a formula for working out how something works.
Go into it a little bit. I'm interested.
So in terms of just, I think if we take it down to like its smallest part, a single joke, you want it's composed of 2 parts, and it's a straight line and a punchline, and your straight line sets up all the information you need to know before the rug is pulled away, before the little twist, before the funny thing is kind of added on. And it's all about yeah, I mean, you could speak for literally weeks about this, and we do. But
Yes.
it's all about kind of getting as much key information, the unfunny information in that first bit, and then keeping that punchline as short as you possibly can make it. And it's like this kind of relief laugh of like ripping this plaster away. But in terms of, so that's the kind of formula for a joke. That's the key components. In terms of actually adding the funny element to it, is a bit sometimes natural talent. You can kind of teach it, and you can kind of find out because there's so many different types of laugh. There's like a relief laugh where someone thinks you're going in this really dark direction and they're kind of holding their breath a bit, and then you send it off in a totally different direction, and everyone laughs together, and you've kind of it's a bit of a magic trick. You've tricked them. And there's like satirical laughs where you're laughing at a politician or something, or there's a laugh where someone goes, "That's funny because it's true." I do that. That's my thing. You know, like Michael McIntyre talks about his man draw.
And again, that's a bit of a relief, isn't it? You go, "Oh, I'm not alone."
Yeah, I'm not alone in this world.
Yeah.
So it's about a huge amount of it's about like things being recognisable as well. So it's a lot of comedy writing and comedy writers is about being like introspective. It's about looking into yourself and finding the weirdest possible things you do, sort of putting them out there to an audience in a way that is palatable and makes everyone else feel comfortable that they're not weird either.
Do you find that I see with a lot of stand-up comics, they typically come from like a background which is quite a depressant or like some sort of hardship, some sort of struggle, and they use that as their like material, or like to be critical or to be cynical about life, and then that's the comedic aspect about like this something that just annoys you, and that's the relevancy. Do you find that there's a difference between the comics that have a depressive background or someone that hasn't?
What's the saying? Like tragedy? Is it tragedy plus time equals comedy? Isn't it?
Right. Yeah. I think that normally is applied to stuff like when it's like all right to laugh about Princess Diana dying. Now it's probably okay to make jokes about it. A week after, not so much, right?
Yeah.
But in terms of people's background, I think with comedians, they're from every single walk of life you can possibly imagine. I think the key common denominator with all comedians is that we've all got, I say we, I wouldn't consider myself a comedian, a comedy writer. We've all got this desperate, neurotic need to please people, and it's in them all. But some have got, like Michael McIntyre's from an affluent background. Other people like whoever, like Ramesh Ranganathan's from a second generation kind of immigrant background. And there's people from middle class backgrounds, upper class comedians. So they come from every single walk of life. But the only kind of common denominator I can find is that just this desperate need to please, because it's punishing. I think you can have like 3 bad weeks on the bounce where you'll just hear your stuff on stage in front of people just die, and you need something wrong with you to keep going back. It's masochistic to an extent.
So have you done writing for stand-ups?
Yeah, I have.
Yeah, okay. Because you always assume it's coming from them directly.
It's like with musicians. It's like you didn't write that song.
Yeah. Well, because it's part of that magic trick we were talking about of making it feel like that person is talking just straight from their heart. It's just straight off the cuff, and it's them. So most comedians don't tell you won't tell an audience, or won't put it on the credits when they've involved writers. They'll kind of pay them separately.
How's that payment? Is it a one-off payment, or is it? Do you ever get
depends
royalties?
Some of the royalties, or
so
get those stacks.
Cheddar.
So if you're just writing for a stand-up comedian, so like the payment is so varied for different projects. But like if you're just writing for a stand-up comedian, they'll normally just go, "Can we get you on a day rate and do a day's worth of gag writing?" And you'll write you'll have kind of their stand-up stuff written down, and you'll work out where your jokes can kind of fit in, and you might write maybe 150 jokes or something in a day and send them to them, and they might use 10, 20.
That's a lot
It's
of jokes to turn out.
It's a huge amount.
Can you reuse those? The ones that they didn't pick?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's a bit of a tricky one because technically they own those jokes once they're paid for them. But if they haven't used them, you can normally think they haven't used them for a reason.
Yeah.
It's not their style, or they don't think they're very funny.
I guess to sort of churn out a lot of jokes, you need to do. I guess it's like a tie between like you want to spend lots of time reading jokes, but surely you've also got to get outside and live life and also research things and I don't know. That's current affairs if that's the sort of thing you write about.
Yeah.
Like, how do you? Yeah.
So
do you have to sort of think about that? Like, I should probably get out of the house a bit more. Like.
When I first kind of got into comedy, we had absolutely no money at all, and it's a bit of a self-fulfilling prophecy. You have no money to go out and experience life, and then you kind of like your life experiences feed into making good jokes. So you, at the start, it's this vicious cycle of not experiencing anything and therefore not being able to write anything hugely imaginative or new or good. And then once you start getting money, you're able to kind of go out. And I make a conscious effort to do things that are really out of my comfort zone and speak to people who are out of my normal bubble of friends, because one of the things in being a good comedy writer is understanding people, I think. So you've got to kind of, like you say, get out there and experience just the weird and wonderful, and even speak to people whose political opinions you sincerely disagree with. It's a tough balance as well, because it's quite a isolated life being a writer. You don't spend a huge amount of time around other people unless you're working on a specific show and you have to come in for a writer's room. And even then, you're normally only there for a few hours, and then you go and sit in a sweaty little room and stare at a page for 6 hours. And it's a real fine balance, I think.
Interesting.
To work.
How long are we? I think it's about an hour, isn't it?
56.
56.
That was awesome, Tom. It was really enlightening.
Thanks.
Enlightening.
Yeah, enlightening, interesting.
Interesting.
I enjoyed it.
I think it's one of those like you said, like the person behind the curtain, like the guy pulling the strings. You know, this is the behind the scenes. It's really interesting just to kind of see
the
that.
Punch and Judy guy stands up.
Yeah,
he's like,
it's an old
dude,
geezer.
it's you.
I feel like I've just ruined comedy for you guys as well.
No, not at all.
No, there's a beauty to it.
Yeah, it's a
Amazing.
craft.
I should have probably put also a disclaimer at the front that I'm not actually very funny. Because when I always forget this, that when I talk to people and they say, "Oh, what do you do?" and I'm like, "Oh, I'm a comedy writer," their faces light up a bit and they're almost like, "Go on,
Tell us a joke.
do the funny stuff
us a
now."
look.
Yeah.
I'm like, I can't. I don't.
I could give you a lecture about comedy.
Give me an hour and I'll write you some gags that
Got any
someone
chalk?
actually funny can make you laugh with.
I've got a question. Do you know any insider knowledge about the Peep Show, and if they do any writing materials themselves, or they've got a team creating that stuff?
Peep Show, the Channel 4 show, with David Mitchell and Robert Webb. As in, are they writing it themselves, or is there...
Yeah, are they involved in the writing process?
Oh, I think a bit. The main writers are Sam Bain and Jesse Armstrong, and they are incredibly talented. They're like at the top of the game in the UK, like writing world, and they write most of it. And I think those once the performers know those characters so well, I'm sure they improvise a huge amount of that, and they'll suggest lines and they'll kind of come up with stuff. But the main bulk of the story and the script will be written by the two writers.
That's amazing.
But yeah,
Interesting.
Yeah. Well, that's great, Tom.
Nice.
Dude,
Thank you for coming
so
on.
much.
No problem. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure.
I
Signing out.
didn't
Signing
ruin it
out.
too much.
No, you're good.